For the final word in sports all across the state, you're listening to Sports Talk with your hosts Bill Kornblut, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. You've been waiting all day, so join the show now by calling 800-956-7266.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome into Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network here on a beautiful, what's turning out to be a beautiful Friday night in the state of South Carolina. Hopefully the rain is moving away and we can have a wonderful weekend with football now here and so much to talk about on this Friday afternoon. Phil Kornblut's on assignment tonight, coming to you from Sports Talk Studio GC, otherwise known as an undisclosed location as we work undercover tonight. Will Pelagic back at Studio B47 in downtown Columbia. And the Professor Tom Hayes is off tonight, getting his weekend underway early. I think he must have a lady friend in town tonight. We've got coverage of USC and Clemson practices as they got underway today. We'll hear from Dabo Sweeney, who talked with the media prior to. We'll hear from USC's OC Brian McClendon, who talked to the media after the USC workout. So we'll have that for you tonight. Our Friday night regulars, we'll talk golf with George Bryan. The South Carolina Amateur is being played this weekend down at Data Island. We'll get the latest on that. We'll update that leaderboard for you. And, of course, the PGA Tour is at Firestone. Monty Dutton, the full Monty on NASCAR as they go racing on the road course at Watkins Glen. So we have got a bunch of stuff to talk about tonight, Will, both locally and nationally. Urban Meyer issued a statement this afternoon after reviewing it, breaking it down. I'm not so sure he did himself any favors by what he had to say today.
He did not, Corn, and not only that, but right now ESPN is airing an exclusive interview with the now fired offensive assistant Zach Smith, the one who, of course, is the center of this embroiled investigation that's going on about whether or not Urban Meyer basically acted accordingly, according to the way things went with the statements that he made on the 24th of July at Big Ten Media Days. And, of course, he comes out with a statement today that basically says his heart is heavy as he witnesses the toll of the events of the past week that they've taken on the Buckeye family. He said that he reported properly the events he heard in 2015 with Zach Smith. He said he takes that responsibility very seriously, and any suggestion to the contrary is simply false. What he said about the statements on the 24th, he said he failed, and my intention was not to say anything inaccurate or misleading, but he was not adequately prepared to discuss these sensitive personnel issues with the media, and that he apologizes for the way that he handled those questions. He says that he looks forward to rejoining the team soon and asks for the support of the coaches and student athletes. This was definitely written with a lawyer in mind and written also with the knowledge of the contract in mind. He basically is trying to at least communicate the fact, Corn, that he believes he acted appropriately, at least behind closed doors, and reported to the proper authorities about the allegations involving Zach Smith. He right now, I think, is kind of throwing his AD, Gene Smith, under the bus and saying, hey, Gene did not compel me to fire him, or the Title IX folks did not compel me to fire him, so I didn't take action, at least at that time, or at least until July 23rd when these allegations came to light. And he's also basically saying, look, you can't fire me for basically misspeaking, although when you can say this in the court of public opinion and at least the court of at least optics, Corn, it doesn't look good. And quite honestly, I think his job could still be in peril as it sits right now on this Friday afternoon evening.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's lying again, and I don't see how as a head coach you can stand in front of the national media as he did last week and clearly have prepared in his mind answers to that question when it came up. He didn't stumble. It didn't look like he was hunting for answers or reasons. I think he was prepared to mislead when he answered those questions. And then the other thing, too, you know, this has got Joe Paterno written all over it, because Joe Paterno's defense was that he contacted the proper authorities and he was going to let them handle it. But here's the thing. You're the head coach, okay? You hire and fire coaches and players. I guarantee you, if something had emerged regarding an Ohio State player and violence against a woman, that player would have been suspended immediately, and then if found to be true or any evidence indicating that it was going to be true, he would have been dismissed from the team.
And here are some of these.
Why this was not done with this coach, maybe because of the coach's deep ties to the Ohio State program through his family, maybe because he goes back many years with Urban Meyer on several stops on his coaching moves. Only he knows that, but he and only he is responsible for hiring and firing of his assistant coaches. He's the head coach. He's paid what, $5-6 million a year to make those kind of decisions? Come on, man. How stupid do you think we are?
And there's some more quotes. Again, as I've told you, they're airing this interview right now with Zach Smith. It just wrapped up on ESPN. And here are some of the aggregated quotes that come from that. This is from Zach Smith. He said, anything that happened to my wife or her body was defensive movements to remove myself from the situation. Urban apparently told Zach Smith, according to him, I swear to God, Zach, if you hit her, you're gone. Zach said marital matters need to stay between a man and a wife and stay personal. I told Urban what he needed to know. You can't have a football coach doing investigating when the authorities are doing the investigating. I believe it's a private matter. This is not a domestic violence case. I don't know what else Urban Meyer could have done. I'd be heartbroken if he loses his job. That would be dead wrong. If he loses his job, it would be flat wrong. And this is the man who fired me. This is spin cycle of the highest order, Corn. And I think, anyone who's involved in this, at least this cover-up, this conspiracy, and this allowance of this domestic violence, the head in my mind needs to roll. And that might even go as far up as the athletic director, because right now Urban's implicating him and the Title IX authorities there at Ohio State, and the fact that they went 3 years between allowing an allowed domestic abuser, at least according to the text messages and pictures that were sent to Urban Meyer's wife, and the allegations that stemmed from an earlier arrest in 2009, and obviously the open hearing that's going on right now in Ohio. This, to me, Corn, it stinks. It stinks to high hell, and in my mind, it's unacceptable in the eyes of Ohio State and in the eyes of those who are trying to advocate for his staying on staff. I think people are trying to look at this and trying to vindicate him based on this statement. I think this not only proves his guilt, I think it further proves his guilt.
Well, in his interview, apparently, he said that he reported something with his wife, an incident going back as far as 2009.
Right.
So 2015 obviously was not the first time. This guy apparently is a serial wife abuser, and he was allowed to stay on the staff of Urban Meyer as he made his moves through the college football world with this knowledge, okay? And, how they could allow that to happen is beyond me. My guess is his loyalty to the guy and the guy's lifelong, through his, I think grandfather was Earl Bruce.
Yes.
Through his lifelong connections to Ohio State. And was he a good coach? Was he a good recruiter and all that kind of stuff? Maybe so. Maybe that was part of it as well. Maybe they look past the violent side of things and the legal side of things and let that slide. But this smells really, really bad. I don't think they did themselves any favors today with the statement put out by Urban Meyer. So this is going to continue to be the talk of college football as we head towards the start of the regular season. It's most unfortunate. So we got that going on. Today, USC and Clemson announced the neutral site arrangement for future baseball series. So the neutral site games have been set through 2022. In 19 and 21, the neutral site game will be in Greenville, and they'll go with the arrangement they've had in the past with either Clemson or USC leading off in the middle game in Greenville. In 20 and 22, the neutral site game will be at Spirit Communications Park in Columbia. So again, they'll play either at USC or Clemson first, then at Spirit Communications, and finish up at the other. And before Clemson fans go nuts and go, what? 2 games in Columbia? I mean, the tickets will be split evenly between the two schools, so you'll have an equal opportunity as Clemson fans and USC fans to get those tickets. And we'll kick this around after the break. I think that's probably a good move, since it gives USC fans and Clemson in the Midlands area a chance to jump into that game. We'll talk about it after the break.
Sports Talk is the sports talk show of Main Street, South Carolina. From the coast to the mountains, we cover it all.
It's Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Plenty to get to. We're going to hear from the offensive coordinator of the South Carolina Gamecocks, Brian McClendon, after their first practice that's happened this morning. The Clemson Tigers are on the practice field right now. Dabo Swinney's comments before the practice in mere moments wanted to at least put some, close the book on the situation involving the South Carolina Clemson baseball series. The games in 2019 and 2021 will start at Doug Kingsmore Stadium in Clemson on Friday, play at Fluor Field Saturday, and then conclude on Sunday at Founders Park in Columbia. 2020 and 2022, Founders Park will be the starting side of the games on Friday. Then Saturday, play at Spirit Communications Park in Columbia, and then back to Doug Kingsmore on Sunday, Corn. And, Dan Radakovich addressed this in comments we'll play later on in the show. He seems fine with it because of the fact of the ticket arrangement is what it is. The fact that there's an even distribution on Saturday. There's plenty of Clemson fans in Columbia. I don't know if there's more Clemson fans in Columbia than there are South Carolina fans in Greenville, but at least in my mind, this satisfies the gripe of a lot of Gamecock fans who think that the Greenville portion of that series previously was played too close to orange turf.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's fair. I think it's a fair arrangement. And again, the tickets will be evenly distributed. So as many Clemson fans who want to come to Columbia and go to the Pro Park can do so. As many South Carolina fans who can get tickets can do the same. So I think this is, and apparently Spirit Communications was willing to pony up some big time bucks to get that. And it's easy. It'll be an easy travel situation when it's in Columbia, because neither team will have to go very far at all to get to the second game. So I think they did well in putting that together. The other news coming out of Clemson today, going into the first day of practice, their agreement with Nike extending the relationship between the two, which now will go through the 2027-28 season. They go back to 2002 as partners. The cash value of the deal increases to $400,000 annually. And, of course, Nike will provide Clemson with all of their apparel for their sports teams. And so this is a good deal for Clemson. And working with Nike, they seem to be very happy with that arrangement. And so Dan Radakovich felt very good about the deal that he put together with those guys today. And
he did, and he called it a top 8 deal. The real money is made with the revenue that comes in from the licensing. They go now to be able to take 14% of the revenue when it comes to being able to sell the Clemson license. Anytime you see the Tiger Paw on anything that's non-Nike, Clemson gets a cut of that, and they get the full cut of that from the 14%, at least, of that licensing sale. So that's, again, another big part of the revenue, which, again, is listed in cash and prizes, if you will, to use the Price is Right term, $58 million over the next 10 years. As we mentioned, Clemson on the practice field right now. Head coach Dabo Swinney wrapped up his comments about an hour ago. Here's a snippet of what he had to say as the Tigers get on the practice field for the first time this afternoon at Clemson.
Yeah, just to get back at it. I mean, you've got to get our installation going. I mean, it's a lot. These guys have worked all summer, and we're allowed to have some football meetings in the summer. You're limited on the time that you can have. We can't be out on the field with them or anything like that. So we've made a little bit of progress, but get the young guys up to speed and kind of get our depth situated the way we need to. Make sure we got everybody in the right spots. We got some evaluating that we need to do early on some guys, but just get our installation going. We're gonna have a lot. Spring's different because you practice every other day and stuff, and it's a slower pace. It's going to be a lot come at these guys these first 5, 6, 7 days. And so get our fundamentals in, get back to the basics, and if we can feel good about where we are. I think day 5 when we get into full pads, from a foundation standpoint, installation, understanding of what we're asking some of these guys to do, then hopefully we can kind of make another jump, practice 5 to 10. So a lot to do these first 5 days.
Let the older guys maybe take more of the lead during these practices, or is this as much for coaches to kind of get back into it?
Well, I mean, like I said, if they could do it without us, they wouldn't need us. We'd just all go sit at the beach or something and show up on game day. But there's a lot. They need us. Everybody's got a part. Everybody's got a role. But I've got 26 seniors last year I had 11, 6 on scholarship and 5 walk-ons. So this is, and I think we got 57 seniors and juniors total. Very veteran group. It's definitely the most I've had, and they're focused. I mean, this is not a nonchalant, casual group. This is a very locked-in group that I really believe knows exactly what they want. And I think we've come a long way. We really have become a close team to this point. We're very pleased with the morale and the chemistry that I've seen already. I'm anxious to get to camp because there's a lot that still has to take place there. But, it's fun to be able to sit in a room full of, last year you're sitting there, you got 6 scholarship guys. Well, I had to build that room. Juniors, a few sophomores, to try to create the type of leadership that I think it takes, because the best leadership comes from within. Can't always be the coach. I tell them all the time, our culture, our standards, our core values need to be reinforced from the bottom up, and so, we've got to, everybody's got to take ownership.
I know you still got to go out and prove everything, but as far as the talent and depth, the veterans itself, is this as good as you felt about a group going into?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a definite. I feel great about this team. I love this team. Last year was such a fun, different challenge for us. But this team, like I said, we've got all the ingredients. I think we've got talent, we've got experience, we've got depth, we've got character, we've got good leadership. So we have, I think, all the things that it takes, and they have the experience and know what it takes. So yeah, I feel great from that standpoint, but you got to go earn it. You got to go do it. There's a quote that I think it says something like, there's nothing more common than unsuccessful people with talent. You got to be willing to pay the price. And I think you could substitute that. There's nothing more common than unsuccessful teams with talent. You got to be willing to pay the price. And so that's a decision that everybody has to make, man. You got to pay the price. There's no shortcuts, no elevator to greatness. You got to take the steps, and you got to grind every single day.
That's Dabo Sweeney from, again, before practice. The Tigers practicing right now on the practice field. They'll get done about 8. Already have seen some pictures, Corn, and I'm seeing more pictures of a particular quarterback who has hair rather than the one who weighed in at 225 pounds and was last year's starter. Just my own opinion.
The websites do love to focus on Trevor Lawrence, at least so far. If you TigerNet, for example, I don't think I've seen maybe seen one picture of Kelly Bryant, but going back to the press conference that Dabo had up in the mountains and then over to ACC Media Days, I mean, almost all the stories on the quarterback situation have featured a picture of Trevor Lawrence, which, that doesn't indicate a darn thing. Kelly Bryant is still the starter, taking the snaps with the first team, I'm sure, in tonight's practice, and will continue to do so until he either falters and coughs up the job, or Trevor Lawrence is just so good. I mean, if he's just so good you can't keep him on the sideline, then you have to move him up and let him play.
Well, it's an indicator of the only thing it indicates is really the appetite of the fan base and the appetite of where I think where they want to see things go with the quarterback situation. And I think it's unfair to Kelly Bryant how he has continued to basically, I don't want to say been cast away or cast off in this case, but in my mind, I still don't think he's I think he's received enough credit for what happened last year. I think all people are focusing on is what happened against Syracuse while he was injured and what happened against Alabama. In my mind, this is still a fluid situation, and its job is just to lose.
Well, we shall see. It's going to be a very interesting battle. I think it will be a battle because the talent of the freshman apparently is so great that a lot of people believe he can rise to the top and give Clemson something at the quarterback position that Kelly Bryant just can't give them. Now, does Kelly Bryant give Clemson something at the quarterback position that Trevor Lawrence just can't give them? That's going to be the thing to be determined here at camp.
Bob Iback will join us next to tell us about a very interesting item for Clemson fans. Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. We're brought to you by Founders Federal Credit Union. Whether it's low rates or high rewards, using select Founders credit cards on clothes, school supplies, a new computer, even college tuition will help prepare your kids for the first day of school. Apply online at foundersfcu.com/visa. Corn, they are getting ready for the festivities up in Canton, Ohio, and our next guest has a very interesting way to get you ready for that.
It is indeed a big weekend for the NFL. The Hall of Fame game was last night. The Hall of Fame weekend in Canton is this weekend, Saturday, the induction ceremonies. and the state of South Carolina's, more in particular, Clemson's own Brian Dawkins. Definitely one of the greatest football players ever to come out of the state of South Carolina, one of the greatest safeties to ever play the game at the NFL level, is going into the Hall of Fame. Our good friend Bob Iback is back with us because he's got something that you want to get your hands on. He's going to tell us about it right now. Good evening, sir.
Hey, good evening, Phil and Will. Nice to be with you. And, ironically, I'm on a baseball bus trip that we've been going to different ballparks the last few days. I'm calling you from the museum in Cooperstown, the Baseball Hall of Fame. But I'll be headed over pretty soon, going to Canton, and I can't wait for tomorrow's festivities for Brian Dawkins. And I'm helping out. He has a new foundation called the Brian Dawkins Increase Foundation that just initiated this summer, which helps out single mothers in times of duress. And we've got something for fans of Brian Dawkins, who played in the 90s back at Clemson. He's the first football player from Clemson ever to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Quite an honor, and that'll happen tomorrow. And we've got a special limited edition football made by Rawlings. It's going to raise monies for his charity. And in a moment, I'll give out a special toll-free number and a website how you can get this. But before I do, I want to kind of point out what you'll be able to purchase for just $99. It's an officially licensed Rawlings football. It comes with a gorgeous acrylic display case for just $99 to help out the Brian Dawkins Increase Foundation, to help out single mothers in time of duress. He just set this foundation up this summer. What we're doing on the football, several different white panels on the ball, very distinctive. One will have the official Pro Football Hall of Fame logo up in Canton on it, with his uniform number from his days at both Clemson and in Philadelphia. With the Eagles, we'll have some of his statistics that he set at Clemson, as well as with the Philadelphia Eagles during his pro football career. We've got another panel on there that has an actual picture of Brian in uniform, the Eagles uniform, and we also have the official Hall of Fame, Pro Football Hall of Fame logo on that. It's very, very colorful. And we have a section on there that's a tribute for Eagle fans who just won the Super Bowl this past February. We've got a lot of cool highlights. So if you didn't get a Super Bowl piece of memorabilia, you'll also have a little bit of that on this football. So it's really, really nice. Again, it's only $99. And the way you can get this is two different ways we set up: a toll-free number and a website. The number that you can call to order, and we just started doing this today, only 2,018 of these footballs will ever be made. They're full size. You can call 1-800-345-2868. That's 1-800-345-2868. Or just go right to the website. You can see the beautiful Brian Dawkins Hall of Fame football there at NIKCO and you spell that NIKCO sports.com. And again, very limited. You'll get a numbered certificate of authenticity with it. So if you're a Clemson fan, you're a fan of just wanting to support something that Brian Dawkins is involved with, and noting that this is very historic, the first time ever a Clemson football player is going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's Brian Dawkins, and we certainly have raised a lot of money for foundations like his in the last 4 or 5 years. I know your network has been a big part of that. We're up to over $2.4 million that we've raised for charities.
Yeah, and we thank you for joining us and passing that on to us, and we will answer any questions from folks who want to get further information and get involved with this. The things you guys have produced, those other footballs related to Clemson or basketballs related to USC, are just terrific. They are so well done. We thank you for this, and we wish you a great weekend at both Hall of Fames.
Okay, listen, we'll check back with you next week, and Phil and we'll have a terrific weekend. Have a safe time, and again, thanks for helping out on this really cool thing for Brian Dawkins and saluting his big day coming up in Canton, Ohio tomorrow.
Thank you, Bob. We appreciate it very much. You know, Will, I covered Brian Dawkins, of course, at Clemson. I covered him when he was being recruited coming out of Jacksonville. And, you know, he was one of those guys who was, in today's world, my guess is he would have been about maybe a 3-star guy if you go by the ratings. In other words, I don't recall him being that heavily recruited a guy. I think South Carolina was in on him. I think Clemson was in on him. They thought he'd be a nice defensive back, a nice safety for them. Man, it just shows you how you can take your game to that next level with work, determination, and talent.
9-time Pro Bowler. Obviously, most of that happening with the Eagles. Of course, finished his career with the Broncos. I got to see him play in the league at both of those stops and got to cover him a little bit near the end, and even had him on for some appearances while I was at the network in Houston. Stand-up guy, did it the right way, and really kind of a self-made football player. And getting a look at the footballs now on the website, which is, again, NICOsports.com, NIKCOsports.com, and the phone number 800-345-2868. Again, it's mostly Eagles on there when it comes to the Hall of Fame stuff, but it has his stats, and very much like we've come to realize with the folks at Nico Sports, lots of attention to detail, a great display piece, and something that if you remember Brian as a Clemson fan or somebody who followed him throughout his NFL career, you need to have this.
Great stuff. Great stuff. And we thank Bob for being with us, and he'll be back with us again next week to further promote what they're doing. 800-956-7266 is the phone number. What a great weekend for him as he gets to hit up 2 Halls of Fame, baseball and football. That's a neat weekend in my book.
It is. South Carolina having a neat weekend of their own. They, along with Clemson, practicing today for the first time in fall camp. South Carolina had its first practice earlier this morning. We're going to hear from Brian McClendon in our next segment here on Sports Talk. Just a couple of the notes that came out of practice. South Carolina, of course, had the media day yesterday, so we at least got some advance notice on the players that wouldn't practice today. And those, of course, include Eldridge Thompson, as well as some of the others, Brad Johnson, Levante Valentine, Jabari Ellis, JT Ebay, Chad Terrell, Ben Asbury. All of those players were in yellow non-contact jerseys. The one surprise, Corn, was Josh Belk, who was at practice but did not participate as he is awaiting clearance from his physical. Of course, the folks at South Carolina confirmed yesterday the stuff that we had for you first from his head coach at Louisville, that he will apply for a waiver from the NCAA in order to obtain immediate eligibility to try and forego the 1-year sit-out penalty. Again, getting kind of the temperature and taking the temperature of some of the people who cover South Carolina as closely as we do, they seem to be pessimistic on the standpoint of whether or not he'll get that waiver approved.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's because there's not outside of the stated reason that he left Clemson being to be closer to his family because of family health reasons. I'm not sure that will be strong enough. Maybe it will be, maybe it won't. Some of these other guys who have transferred and gotten immediate relief, they've transferred from like Ole Miss, where everybody can transfer without penalty because of the probationary status of the program. And I think in other cases, guys have some compelling reasons why the NCAA would rule in their favor. Maybe they'll look at this and give a thumbs up. It would certainly be big for South Carolina because he is big. And even though he's inexperienced on the collegiate level at this point, he would give them some girth inside. And they definitely need some depth and some muscle in there and some size, playing that over nose and 1 and 2 techniques and things like that right in the middle of the defensive line.
Yeah, he came in, his weight is listed at 359, and I will echo even the same thing that you said yesterday, speaking of weight, about Javon Kinlaw, and I incorrectly listed his weight on our Twitter. My apologies to him. He came in about 305, 303, and he looks as svelte of 303 as anybody I've seen at that weight because of how slim he is and how redistributed his weight is. But the guys look good from what we saw. Again, we weren't able to see much, just a little stretching and some individual drills and pursuit drills, but we should be looking forward to more of that. We'll practice back on the field tomorrow morning, and we'll hear from their offensive coordinator, Brian McClendon, next on Sports Talk.
Now back to Sports Talk, South Carolina's most listened to sports talk show for more than 30 years.
You know, our friends in the upstate corn can't help themselves. They really can't.
How's that?
From our friend of the program, Zach Lentz. He said, to this untrained observer who watched the first 8 periods of practice, there's clearly a better passing quarterback on this team, and it's not really that close. It's the first day. It's August 3rd.
People want it, or some people want it.
I told you, it's more the appetite of the people. I don't think it's indicated.
I deflect people back to what Cleveland Farrell told you at ACC Media Day.
Exactly.
I mean, he's there. He sees it every day. How could he be so wrong? Unless, of course, there's a built-in bias on his behalf standing behind the senior veteran quarterback.
I don't know. Maybe he's talking. Maybe I'm misreading it, and he's talking about Kelly. But he wouldn't have written it in that way if he was talking about Kelly. I don't think. Right?
No, of course not. Of course not.
I'm not trying. I'm not trying to read into my friends.
Guys out there who are saying this Trevor Lawrence kid, just coming out of high school, based on his high school career, is one of the greatest passers they've ever seen at any level of football. I mean, the hype on this guy has been incredible for the last 2 years, which really makes it almost impossible for him to live up to the expectations.
But like I've said before, they could probably go undefeated in this ACC schedule with Chase Bryce at quarterback also.
Knock on Chase.
No knock on Chase. It's just that's how loaded they are at that position and how I think far ahead the rest of the team is ahead of the opponents on their schedule. But that, again, is a story for different things. Speaking of what's going on with camp, South Carolina had its first practice of camp this morning. Brian McClendon was not exactly happy with his wide receiving core that practiced this morning, but all in all, he is very, very much in the mindset of the fact that it is the first day and there's still a lot ahead before they get it kicked off here 29 days from tomorrow.
To be honest with you, I think everything around here in general, we try to do at a fast pace, try to make sure that it's as high intensity as possible. And I think that's more so what kind of filters through everything else. But just knowing that we want to play with tempo and be able to dictate tempo offensively, I think that's helped in the off season and definitely helped in the preparation part of it all.
We've heard how Jake maybe prefers to play fast. How has a guy like Donnell, who's really the point of that attack, how's he adjusted to it?
I think the O-line in general is what drives it all, no matter what you're doing. So to get all those guys on the exact same page. And make sure that everybody knows and adheres to kind of everything that we're trying to do standard wise. I think more so than anybody, but up front, those guys have to make sure that they're on top of things in that way.
There's an appetite for those who observe this program and who watch this program for change with the offense. How are you satisfying that appetite?
Well, I don't know how I can answer that question right now, to be honest with you. But the one thing I want to do is just give everybody a product that they can be proud of. And the one way that we can do that is, one, we're going to try to do a great job of getting our playmakers the ball. That's going to be one. And two, we're just going to go out there and we're going to compete at a high level and play as hard as we possibly can to the very, very end. And I think if we do that, good things will happen.
Is it more blank canvas, or is it more just fine-tuning what's there?
It's a little of both, to be honest with you. I mean, we have a great understanding of kind of what we want to do. There are some things that we got to make sure that we get good at. So when it gets into that stuff, that's when it kind of gets into the specifics and the fine-tuning. And there's some stuff, quite frankly, that we might see and say, hey, you know what, this way might be a little bit better. And so that's why I say it's probably a little bit of both to it.
How would you describe your personality, and how do you think it affects your play calling?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the one thing I will say is just, I want to be aggressive. I want to be aggressive. I want to make sure that I feel like in order to score points, you have to try to score points. All right. And so I think that's going to be, my mindset as far as going out there and calling it, you know what I mean? And so sometimes I might have to get reeled back a little bit, and I'm okay with that. But other than that, I just want to make sure that we're going out there and we want to be aggressive in everything that we do.
What do you do to try and make third down an asset instead of a problem like it was last year?
Well, a lot of it, third down situations come up to first and second down, what you do there. And so it's just putting a premium on making sure that you're doing a really good job on first and second down. Obviously, 3rd and 4 is a lot more manageable than 3rd and 12. Okay, and so that's where we try to make sure that you do a good job on first and second down and staying out of those third and long situations as best as you possibly can. Obviously, that's not going to happen all the time. And then that gives you the best chance to kind of be able to keep your playbook open as much as you possibly can. 3rd and 11, 3rd and 10, stuff like that, you kind of have to get one-dimensional a little bit more than you want to be.
Post snap, is Jake reading? How do his reads compare to this offense to last time?
I think it depends on what's happening. Pre-snap, some stuff's got to take place. Post-snap, some stuff's got to take place. Obviously, in the pass game, and if you are running an RPO, different things that you might be looking at. But all in all, some of the stuff's going to be the same. Some of the stuff's going to be a little bit different.
At South Carolina offensive coordinator Brian McClendon, you can point to the inefficiencies last year of why the number next to the win column for South Carolina wasn't double digits to the offensive inefficiencies. 24 points per game last year, near the bottom of the SEC corn. They need to turn those numbers around, maybe to 35, 40 if they want to make what happens this year bigger than what they need from last year.
Well, don't get caught in the same trap I got caught in last year when I predicted.
I didn't say that
inaccurately that the Gamecocks would average over 30 points per game because I thought that Kurt Roper would have it together, and Jake Bentley, after having a half year behind him and these other players coming along, I thought that offense was ready to take off.
I'm not saying
me wrong.
I'm not saying that they're going to. I'm saying they have to if they want to get beyond that little ceiling that they've placed for themselves there.
Well, I'm not so sure they've got to average 40 because I think their defense is the defense has been good enough and should be even better to keep them within range. If they can hold the opponent to 20, they should be scoring in the 30s, and that should win them a bunch of ball games.
I'm just not – I have to see more out of that safety position. That's the one thing that I'm looking at. I'm saying the middle is going to be very exposed deep beyond the linebacking situation. It's my only concern.
All right, let's get to recruiting. And as I do that, I want to remind folks that if you lose us over the airways for whatever reason, you can find us on our website as we stream on YouTube and also our Periscope. You can also get us on stations on the TuneIn app and also the radio.com app. And our Columbia affiliate, The Point Radio, never preempts us. You can go to their website, which now has made available a live feed there. And that, of course, is makethepointradio.com. Makethepointradio.com. Check it out. You can listen to us there if you lose us over the airwaves and you want to stay with us. Let's jump into recruiting. We're getting towards the top of the hour. Offensive lineman Darius Washington of Pensacola, Florida, committed to Mississippi State in early June, but he's not shut down his recruiting. And USC is one that's involved. Will Muschamp and Eric Wolford have been on him hard, talking with him, texting him practically every day. He'll take an official to USC probably the Georgia weekend. And Miami is the other one he's looking at real hard, and he says it'll be tough to pull him away from Mississippi State at this point. Cornerback Malachi Moore of Trussville, Alabama, has Clemson in his top 6 with Alabama, Auburn, LSU, Florida, and Tennessee. Clemson offered 2020 safety Malcolm Green of Highland Springs, Virginia. Defensive lineman Enoch Jackson, who had Clemson in his top 3, committed to Arkansas, recently offered Clemson target offensive lineman Stacy Wilkins of Camden, Arkansas, committed to Oklahoma over the Tigers in Arkansas. 2019 Clemson target linebacker Spencer Lytle will announce his decision tomorrow at 4 o'clock Eastern time. That's between Clemson and Wisconsin. Basketball, 6'9", P.J. Hall of Dorman was at Clemson for a visit on Wednesday. Clemson, USC, Florida, Georgia, recent offers for him. Said he really enjoyed the visit to Clemson. It was a lot of fun for him. He likes Brad Brownell, likes what they're telling him. He likes Frank Martin, likes what he's telling him. He has visited USC recently as well. He plans to get down to visit Georgia and Florida as soon as he can. 2020 point guard Miles Tate of Dorman was offered by South Florida. USC women offered 2020 6'5" Hannah Gusters of Duncanville, Texas, 2021 6'4" Latasha Lattimore of Toronto, and 2022 6'1" Nyla Harris of Orlando. Baseball, 2019 USC commitment shortstop Cameron Guidry of Snellville, Georgia, decommitted last night. Call for the hour. We'll be back.
2 of Sports Talk up next with your hosts Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic, and the Professor Tom Hayes. Don't leave us hanging. Join the show, 800-956-7266.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network on a Friday night. Phil Kornbluth, Will Pelagic taking you into the weekend. Been talking a lot of football. We'll have a little more of that coming your way, of course. But we've got some golf and some NASCAR right around the corner for you. And let's, first of all, update what is happening on the links this afternoon. And Ian Poulter, Tommy Fleetwood, and Justin Thomas all share the lead. They're in round 2, wrapping up round 2 at Firestone. In that invitational, Kyle Stanley, former Tiger, is right there at 9 under after a 68. Jason Day is also at a 9 under par. As for some others, Rory McIlroy has played his way into the hunt at 8 under par after 2 rounds after 67. Tiger Woods is 6 under after a 68. Phil Mickelson is 5 under. Dustin Johnson is even. Bubba Watson is even. Kevin Kisner is +2 after a 68 today. Jordan Spieth +3 after a 72 today. And I do not believe there is a cut in this event, so everybody will be around for the weekend. As for the 87th South Carolina Amateur being played down at Daughtah Island, William Harwood of Columbia is at 10 under par after a pair of 66s. Right now he is tied with Jake Carter, who's on the course, a 64 yesterday. He's 10 under with a few holes to play, and they have cleared themselves from the field. Caleb Provo would be next at 6 under par. He's out of Lexington after a 67 today. Ben Carnes of Johns Island, 5 under on the course after a 66 yesterday. So we welcome in to Sports Talk for some birdies and bogeys around South Carolina. Of course, George Bryan III, and we are joined tonight by Nick Frank from Daughtah Island, who is the superintendent of the Cotton Dyke course, where they are playing the amateur. George, how are you?
Oh, I couldn't be better. And I am so impressed. You're current. You just hit it. You hit it right in the center of the sweet spot. The South Carolina Radio Network should cover the South Carolina State Amateur. And right there, Daughtah Island is one of my favorite places in the whole world. And, hey, it's really cool to have Nick on. I met him in Augusta, and he's counterparts with my college roommate, my best buddy, Chris Newnham. And for you to be this current, I mean, how do you do that, man?
Hey, man, we're cutting edge here on Sports Talk. Let's welcome Nick in, and you got a great weekend shaping up there, Nick, and tell us about the course and how the golfers are handling it. A couple of guys are doing quite well out there.
Yeah, a lot of guys are doing well. We've had a lot of rain. This morning alone we had 2 inches on them, but they're fighting through it, and they seem to be scoring all right. It looks like the cut or the cut line will be about 7, +7, which means, it seems to be fair. A couple guys ran away with it, but we'll see how they do on the weekend once it starts drying up a little bit.
Nick, I'm
what
glad,
makes the Cotton Dyke course? Oh, sorry, George, go ahead.
Hey, it's really it's awesome. The Cotton Dyke course is a spectacular layout. It's really neat to have Nick in, and part of our topic the last few weeks, especially through the majors, have been course setups. Tell us a little bit about. I love to hear the scores, 10 under pars, and I just got to tell you, these players, if the PGA Tour came through, the scores would not be much different. But talk a little bit about how you all are setting up the state amateur for this event, Nick.
We had the rough set 2.5, and that's pretty penal, but they can get out, and greens are rolling about 12.5, 13, depending on the weather. And
that's fast.
Yeah, they're quick. The greens there's a little bit of undulation, but they're fairly flat, so it's not unfair. And
how wide are the fairways?
Most of them 40 yards wide. A lot of tree line though, so if you get off, you're going to be caught up under the live oaks and the pines. And
I think it's a beautiful thing. Obviously, you all are getting some rain. Have you experienced some rain delays in this event?
Yeah, it's been a long we had to finish up. There's some play to finish up this morning on 18, and then the rain came in this morning out of nowhere. And they're currently still going at it with some drizzle out there. But it cleared out about 10 o'clock, and the guys have had a fairly good day.
Are you playing lift, clean, in place, or are you playing it down?
Today's lift, clean, in place.
I'll tell you what, I love to hear the scores as they are, and I can imagine that the golf course is in absolutely beautiful condition. And the one thing about you guys down there, Dave Britton always, he's a beautiful host. And Brian, it's slipping my mind. What's Brian's last name? He is the head.
Brian Hollingsworth.
Yeah, you all do a spectacular job, and it's really cool for the members to host the event. Not only do you all host this event, but it's you really supported the South Carolina Golf Association.
Yeah, this is the first year we had both the Junior Am and the State Am. That's the first time they've ever done that on the same course in the same year.
Was there a difference in how you guys set it up?
The greens were a little bit slower and the roughs were a little bit lower. But as far as, the tee placements were a little bit up, but the course plays 6,600. So for them, it was more like 64. But overall, it's basically the same golf course.
Beautiful. I love to hear the width of the fairways. And the one thing that I think you can definitely defer, but do you have a comment on how the USGA set up the golf course for this year's Open at Shinnecock?
Can you repeat that?
Do you have a comment on the course set up at Shinnecock?
I don't. The thing about that is I don't know that they knew the weather was coming like it did, but in the same sense, you can't over penalize players. It's hard. Golf's hard enough, and if you're giving guys not the opportunity if they hit a good shot to make a good score, that just doesn't seem fair to me. But they obviously had something else in mind.
George is still mad about that. You're still mad about that, George.
Well, when you rob the game from its origin, take it away, I think we got to fix things that are broken. And the USGA has a distorted sense of how the course should be set up now. As I say that, what we're talking about now is the SCGA is part of the USGA, and they're setting up. They have a lot of influence on what's going on with the State Am. So I'm really pleased that the pinnacle of the USGA, the Biff Lathrop and the SCGA staff and the South Carolina staff is set up. Sounds like it's extremely playable and a lot of fun. The bottom line, this game's played for fun. So that, I think, setup has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, the fun part should be obviously a part of it for those of us who hack it around. I enjoy seeing the best in the world challenge, but I think you're right. With the weather, the way it was, and the way that course was set up, it was way over the top. The British Open, which always has weather, was a lot more fun to watch, if you ask me.
And hey, if that's what it. And I know Nick said in there, if the game is fun, people will play, and it's really a privilege to be part of this program. And Nick, I appreciate you joining us, and look forward to how things. In fact, I strongly recommend the folks go find Dapto Island. You just go to Beaufort and keep going straight on out, and you'll see it on the left. The entry, the gate fee. If you can go through the guards, is there a guard gate, or can you just drive right in, Nick?
No, there's a guard gate out there, but I'm sure they'll let you through.
Guys, George, we got to go. Great stuff. We thank you, Nick. Thank you, George. We'll get you next week.
See him high, but shoot him low.
You got it. All right, GB3 with us here, and that's good stuff from the 87th South Carolina Golf Association Amateur Championship. Again, William Harwood, Jake Carter tied for the lead at 10 under. Back in just a moment.
This is the place to talk Tigers, Gamecocks, and more. Sports talk across the state on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk South Carolina Radio Network. Fall practice underway for South Carolina and Clemson. South Carolina in the books this morning. Clemson still in progress, although the viewing period for the media is over. Lots of high praise being leaped on Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. Kelly Bryant got his licks in as well. Saw a lot of the comments involving even some of the rising freshmen, or at least the guys who are coming in and getting a chance to at least see the field for the first time in front of the media. Guys like KJ Henry, Justin Ross, and the like. Jackson Carman also getting some very big plaudits from people who are again, starting to file their reports from what's happening over at the Poe Athletic Complex and the Reeves facility as well. But Clemson will be back on the practice field tomorrow evening as well. Carolina will do so tomorrow morning. But, Corn, right now, tonight, all across the state, more high school football scrimmages getting ready as their season's beginning to get underway as well.
Oh, yeah, and you know who is tuned into that? It's our good friend David Shelton, High School Sports Report, Charleston Post and Courier. Let me ask you first, I know the other day up in Spartanburg, it was Spartanburg and Dutch Fork getting together in a scrimmage, and perhaps there were other teams there as well, but what kind of reports have you gotten from that scrimmage?
Didn't get a lot. I read some stuff on Twitter and, some from a couple of fans who obviously think both teams are going to win the Super Bowl, and then you get some more legitimate reports that things went well. I think Dutch Fork is going to be good, and I honestly have a hard time reading much into first scrimmages. They've been in pads for a couple of days. It's hard to. It's almost like those preseason games in the NFL. Those first ones, you get a little bit of a read in terms of what teams have in terms of athletes, but it's kind of really hard to see how they're going to put it all together. I mean, they still got a couple of weeks, and usually scrimmage number 2 or jamboree is when I pay a lot of attention, because most of the time they'll put, their ones out there for a considerable amount of time. And, Berkeley and Brooklyn Casey scrimmage today, and, I heard both teams looked pretty good in some areas, and I think Brooklyn Casey is going to be a team that can contend in 4A. And, Berkeley looked good offensively, got exposed a little bit defensively. They are replacing some linemen, but their offense is going to score with the receivers and the running back and the quarterback. I mean, they return a lot of firepower, but they're going to, they may be a team that just outscores a lot of people.
What are you hearing out of Fort Dorchester? Of course, they had to replace Takerion Joyner. Who steps in there? How have they looked?
I got to see them earlier in the week, just, maybe for 45 minutes, and I talked to LaPratt. I can tell you this. They're going to miss Joyner, and they're going to miss Williams and Simmons at receiver. But, man, they still have a lot of good-looking, strong, athletic-type players. I mean, Joyner was Joyner, and you don't replace him, in a year. You just try to figure out what's good behind him. But they do have a young man, DeAndre Sabb, who played a lot last year because they were winning by 40 at half, and they sat Joyner. And so Sabb got to run with the one, so to speak, quite a bit last year. They also have Tremez Brown, who was at Fort, left and went to First Baptist and threw for 2,300 yards and led them to a state title. Well, he's back at Fort now that, there's less competition at the position. And, but their running back, Khalil Jenkins, he's a junior. And I'm telling you, he's a big timer. He's a player, and they're going to feed him a lot. He's got to stay healthy. The offensive line they're going to be okay, I think, up front, but defensively, they lost everybody except for maybe one linebacker and one tackle. But LaPratt says they're going to be better defensively than they were last year because of the guys that are the athletes that they have. So, we'll see. I think it's them, Somerville, and Berkeley down here in 5A. Those three teams seem to be a good bit ahead of everybody else. And then really the next best team in the area is probably Timberland.
Let's go to the upstate. David Shelton with us here talking high school football. Let's go over to Anderson, West Side and TL Hanna. Hanna got supposedly has a ton of talent, of course. The Pickens kid, the defensive end, is committed to USC. Supposed to be a very good player. And of course, Scott Early over at West Side always puts together a great offensive team. What do you see coming out of Anderson?
I think both teams are going to be very competitive. They're going to be in the 8, 9, 10 win season type deal. You know, Alex Meredith at Hanna is back at quarterback, and he's got a very solid year in that system, that kind of wishbone wing T attack. I think he's committed to Army, and he's got a great grasp of that offense. And, you know, and you're right, at Westside, you know, they graduate guys, but Early can find a way to put them together. Their key is going to be defensively and up front. Can they block people and open holes and have some sort of a running game? Because they're going to find a way to swing it around a little bit. They had great 7-on-7 summer, which they always do. But, you know, when the rubber meets the road, you got to block people up front. People are coming after your quarterback. There is a rush unless they change the rules. So that's something that Westside will have to deal with. But I still think they're talented enough and athletic enough to, you know, to be a winning team, you know, 7, 8, 9 win type team.
Talking with David Shelton here from the Charleston Post and Courier. Of course, people are wondering about the domination of South Point, whether that will continue. We know about Jalen Mahoney, the Wake Forest commit at corner. Do they have what it takes to be able to reload themselves?
Yeah, I think so because, you know, I mean, again, like replacing DeCarrion Joyner, replacing Darion Kendrick is probably not, you know, is probably not going to happen, but they're going to find a guy that can spread it around. Before Kendrick, there was Greg Ruff, who's going to be the starter at Newberry. He threw it around. So they're going to always have a guy that's a great athlete that can swing it around. And I have to think they're always going to be good on defense. They've got players. You know, Jason Winstead, their coordinator, is now the coach at Goose Creek. And I spoke with him during one of their practices about, you know, we were talking about football in general. And I just asked him, I said, you know, what do you think about South Point? And he's like, yeah, anybody that thinks they're going to drop down considerably is just crazy. He goes, and he would know what's in the program. He said, they're going to be very good. Once again, I think in 4A, you know, the top teams are going to be South Point and Hartsville and Greer and probably Myrtle Beach. And then there's a bunch of teams that, depending on how they develop over the course of the season, maybe they can make a run. But if one of those four I mentioned doesn't win the 4A title, it'll sort of be an upset.
So I know last year I kind of waffled between Bishop England and Whitmire. Should I be looking for a new team, or should I stick with the aforementioned?
Well, Will, now, I mean, you need to be a fan, and you just don't waffle from year to year. Phil, what do you got over there, man?
I learned from the best. My co-host is a front runner. You know, he does root for the Yankees and the Green Bay Packers in America in every war since the 1800s. So, I mean.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think Bishop England and Whitmire would be fine choices as long as you don't, you know, bet cash. I think you're going to be okay. I think Bishop England's going to be they've got a lot to replace, including the quarterback who's now Notre Dame, Albano, but they did get a transfer in that I think is going to help them a good bit from Ohio. It seems to be a pretty good quarterback. So I think the Bishops will be competitive in their region. It's kind of a region, you know, with Manning and Georgetown and Waccamaw and Hanahan. I think it's a wide open region. I don't think there's a real stud team in that group. So, you know, yeah, stick with the Bishops. I don't like this waffling thing. You got to stick with your team.
Hey, David, 30 seconds. Give us a couple of scrimmages coming up across the state that you know about that'll be worth watching here in the next week or so.
Well, I think the Jamborees next week will be really good, but I know that tomorrow at Irmo, I want to say it's at 11 a.m., you're going to have Fort Dorchester and Northwestern. So that's going to be like a playoff type game. Again, I don't know how long the starters will play, but I would imagine the Fort Dorchester starters will play a good bit because they need to work. And then you got Northwestern with Dustin Noller at quarterback and Holly at receiver. I think they're explosive. So that's the one that comes to mind. I think Somerville goes to Conway tomorrow afternoon. That's another good one. But, you know, if I didn't have anything to do tomorrow, I would drive to Irmo to watch Fort Dorchester and Northwestern. I think that'll be fun to watch.
Superb. Thank you, my friend. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week as we get ever so close to the start of the high school football season. August 16th, the first games in state. Be right back.
The latest on this weekend's race is around the corner. The full Monty on NASCAR is next. This is Sports Talk.
Welcome back, Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Back here on a Friday. Still monitoring what's going on out at Clemson, waiting for them to get off the field. If time permits, we might give you a chance to hear from somebody there. Also, Dan Radakovich, the athletic director at Clemson, his comments from earlier today, not only on the events that happened with Clemson's renewal of their Nike relationship 10-year extension, but also future football schedules and the baseball scheduling between the two from Clemson and South Carolina's perspective with the neutral site games. But right now we'll go racing. NASCAR gentlemen are at Watkins Glen for the road course in upstate New York. Practice tomorrow morning, Corn, and the full Monty is here with us.
Indeed, he is. The full Monty on NASCAR. We welcome in Monty Dutton of MontyDutton.com fame, novelist, and former beat writer for NASCAR, who knows as much about the sport as anybody. But before we talk about all that, I know that I'll give you a chance to comment about the passing of a NASCAR media legend early this week. Somebody I'm sure that you rubbed elbows with a time or two in the various press boxes.
Yes, Tom Higgins and I knew each other very well. There is a blog at MontyDutton.com on the memories of Pappy Higgins. He was a commanding presence. I described him in my blog as having a voice that would be like if God decided he wanted to play Daniel Boone. And he would he was the type of person, he really should have made, I always thought that once he retired, he should have made a living narrating things. He would have been a good voice, like doing an outdoorsy thing, one of those old Disney films about Charlie the Lonesome Coyote or something like that. He would have been excellent at that. He's a good man.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, he kind of, the majority of his time, I think, and most of his fame was with NASCAR, but I do think that he spent a good bit of time writing about the great outdoors, did he not?
Yes, he was Combination Outdoors and NASCAR writer for most of the time that he was there. I think he may have continued to write outdoors columns regularly after he officially retired from the NASCAR beat. I think that was in 1996, I believe, because I believe the success of the late David Poole began in 97. But as I said, I have a lot of funny memories of Higgins. He was just he was fond of his booming voice saying things like "merciful God" when there would be a good-looking woman walking across the track in front of the press box. But at the same time, in personal settings, he was very, chivalrous and very polite. And I think the best way to do that is those are just sort of difficult. Those are different times, in the age we live in today. The person has to watch how flirty he can be.
This is indeed true. Monty Dutton with us, the full Monty on NASCAR. A quick reflection on Pocono round 2 last weekend where Kyle Busch wins again. I think the race best remembered by his last restart and how he pulled away, but also some of the real hard hits some drivers took in that race.
Well, it was, Darrell Wallace Jr. hit the wall in a way that before they had soft walls would have probably caused a serious injury. And it was even reminiscent in some ways of the one injury last year when Eric Almendola was out for several races. It was one of those, every race, a big 3 race, because the only person who could have beaten Busch was Harvick. And Kevin Harvick roared up through the pack, but he eliminated himself late in the race, and there was no one left. And I'm afraid that with a few exceptions, that's the way that there's no sign it's going to be any other way right now.
Monty, of course, we really don't have much to go off of because practice is tomorrow. Usually we have either practice or a qualifying session in the books before we talk about the race. But Martin Truex Jr., at least we can go off of Sonoma, had the earlier road course race earlier this year. What is your best prognostication as we head to Watkins Glen this weekend?
Well, I think maybe more than any road course I remember. Usually there's a little bit wider field, but I think one of the big 3, I think that Kyle Busch is probably the favorite, and I think that he has 2 victories at the Glen. Harvick is a very good road racer, but his road course victories have been at Sonoma and Truex. And I think that what makes it difficult is I expect they'll qualify fast unless there's some kind of inspection difficulty like Harvick had last week. And track position will be important because there's a lot of cars that get damaged in wrecks and all the jousting and tussling that goes on back through the pack. And it's good to be up near the front. And I expect somebody who's up near the front all day will probably win it. In the current incarnation of road coursing in NASCAR, if you're looking for a sleeper, I think that a good pick might be Daniel Suarez, who's on a bit of a rally. I think another one might be Denny Hamlin, but I don't really see that. Hamlin's one of these guys I keep picking, and he doesn't win. So another one might be A.J. Allmendinger, who his only victory was on a road course.
No Eric Jones love?
No, but he's one of the ones in the next group. I was looking at the odds a while ago, and I noticed that Suarez was 40-1. And even though I don't even know where you could go right now and bet on a NASCAR race, but I've always been inclined to sort of like say you lose $2, but you win big if you get a long shot. So I was looking at those a while ago, and Harvick and I think Busch is 3-1, Harvick's 4-1, Truex is 4-1, and it falls off from there. And without looking at anybody in practice and seeing what qualifying says, I really don't feel like going out on a limb. I'm going to pick Harvick just because I pick Busch every week lately, and I've been winning because of that. But just to avoid the monotony.
Monty Dutton with us, full Monty on NASCAR. So, I mean, look, I know any of the big-time drivers and the big-time teams, they could win on any given Saturday or Sunday whenever the race is held. But, I mean, are we about ready to dismiss Jimmy Johnson for this season, having a victory where he just goes out and wins one? I mean, maybe he might stumble into one, but, I mean, my goodness, here we are heading towards the playoffs, and I don't see them getting a whole heck of a lot better.
There are no signs of life. That's the fact. He has 2 top 5 finishes, but he hasn't come very close to winning. He may get in the playoffs, but he's going to be a real long shot. And the playoffs aren't as wide open as before because now you have these playoff points you carry into the postseason. And the fact is it might well be that 9 races are going for one person because it's hard to imagine with the point system that Busch, Truex, and Harvick aren't going to be 3 of the top 4 at the end. So it gets to be kind of 9 races beside the other guy. Then he has as much chance as anyone. But they've pulled back from the wide open nature of the old chase.
Well, he's never won at Watkins Glen, and like you said, and like I suggested, not showing any signs of somebody who's going to break through this weekend. So, real quick, about 30 seconds, give us a good tip, a setup tip, and what they're working on in the garage that will make a difference at Watkins Glen for the winter, staying out of trouble, of course.
Well, Watkins Glen is tactically interesting because sometimes someone can pull something out of a hat on pit strategy. At a road course, it's not about pitting under caution. It's about pitting under green and forcing others to pit under caution. No one loses a lap there. So there's a little bit more tactical leeway for a smart crew chief to put his driver in front at the crucial time.
Monty, as always, we thank you. Great stuff, great insight. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you next week.
I just hope it stops raining. Take care.
Ha! Don't we all? All right, the full Monty on NASCAR. We've got Dan Radakovich, Dan Red. Comments from him coming up in a moment.
These guys, they never sleep. Check them out on the web at SportsTalkSC.com. Now, more of Sports Talk on the South Carolina Radio Network.
Sports Talk, South Carolina Radio Network. Things wrapping up on the Clemson practice field right now. Things have already been wrapped up for a while at South Carolina. They're back in action tomorrow morning are the Gamecocks. Clemson in action tomorrow evening. Of course, we'll be keeping an eye on the commitment of Spencer Lytle, the potential Clemson target who will choose between the Tigers and Wisconsin. That will come down around 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific. He is a Pacific time zone person, so that will be at least happening out there. I don't know if, Corn, you saw this note earlier today. Coastal Carolina has brought on former Conway head coach Chuck Jordan. He's back in the football limelight. He will be an analyst for high school relations at Coastal under Joe Moglia after the 34-year career of his at Conway High School, which involved him, of course, being an athletic director, head coach, and math teacher wrapped up. 61-year-old Jordan will be the liaison with the high school coaches and assist also at summer camps and the walk-ons, and just a way to get somebody who has been in a big part of the community out by the beach a chance to get to the next level.
Yeah, that's good news. I'm glad to hear the coach is getting back into it in some form or fashion. And, I believe he went into the High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame here in South Carolina this summer, deserving of that, and did such a great job over all those years at Conway High School. It's a shame that he was forced out under very controversial circumstances. So I'm glad that he's got a chance to get back and do what he loves, and that is be involved with football in some form or fashion. And, Joe Moglia is a smart man. He didn't become a billionaire by accident, and he also knows that you have to rely on smart people and experienced people to help build your program, and that's what he's doing here.
And, of course, like I said, the controversial exit during the 2017 football season had him on administrative leave. The criminal charges involving the altercation with the 17-year-old student were later dropped, and they decided not to renew his contract. But he gets at least a second chance, a redemption chance at Coastal as an analyst, and we'll see how he can contribute that football program. Early today, Clemson Athletic Director Dan Radakovich spoke to the media, originally speaking about the issues, or at least the renewal of the partnership with Nike that will now last through the 2027-2028 football and athletic seasons to basically supplement the already very long-standing agreement that has been in place since 2002 between Nike and Clemson. $58 million over the next 10 years going to Clemson to furnish their athletic teams, but also Dan Rad with comments on future football scheduling and, of course, the Clemson South Carolina baseball series, which had its neutral site games basically placed for the next 4 years. They'll be alternating between Greenville's Fluor Field and Columbia's Spirit Communications Park, the home of the Columbia Fireflies. This is the Clemson AD on those items earlier today.
I would say that we are a top 8 Nike deal. As you look at some of the other Adidas, Under Armour, I'm not exactly sure, David, where that throws us, but this is a top 8 Nike deal.
The new baseball contract was announced today as far as a neutral site game. How did that kind of come about, and what are your thoughts on planning for it?
Well, we have the arrangement that was with Greenville was coming to a close. So Coach Tanner and myself had a few conversations, as well as Kyle Young and Kevin O'Connor of their staff, solicited bids from places around the state to host that game. And as we evaluated those, since the last time we did this, a new ballpark has come on board, obviously in Columbia. So as we evaluated all of those bids, we came down to the fact that, from a student athlete perspective, from a fan perspective, going 4 years, 2 in Greenville, 2 in Columbia made an awful lot of sense. It was good economically, and I think it was really good from a fan perspective.
Do you have any worries about it being so close to their campus down there as far as a neutral site?
Not really, because, we're going to get half the tickets. So I think that we have a lot of fans in the Columbia area, and we're going to hope for them to come out to Spirit Communications Park and cheer on the Tigers when that game is at that stadium, because as is the case here and is the case there, visiting fans have a very difficult time getting tickets inside the home ballpark.
Columbia had the highest bid.
They were amongst the highest, yes. I mean, it was pretty close. They were all kind of pulled together. Columbia and Greenville.
Do you ever think it'll go back to Charleston or maybe play Myrtle Beach on you? Do you ever think that'll happen?
It certainly could. Again, it really boiled down to some logistics as it related to that. One thing that you never say never as it relates to those kind of things, but we wanted to lock in this 4-year period and just kind of put it behind us and then see where that takes us after 2022.
I know that there have been maybe some reports that Georgia and LSU could be on the football schedule down the road. Are you guys still having?
We're still having conversations with those two that you mentioned and others as well. Football scheduling is like a cake that never bakes. It just kind of goes on, and we're trying to get our schedule taken care of through the decade of the 20s. We're close, but we'll look forward to we'll get that news out as soon as it's done. And, I think, believe me, there's nothing more that I would like to, and Kyle Young, who works in our office on football scheduling, than to get that out, because football scheduling takes a lot of different twists and turns.
How exciting will it be if that does end up being finalized to get to play some of those SEC?
Oh, I think it'd be great. I mean, you could look at our past history. I mean, that's kind of what we do. We have our rival game with the University of South Carolina, but we also have looked to try to play another Southeastern Conference opponent each and every year. Auburn for 3 years, Georgia, Texas A&M, obviously the next 2 years. ACC is a little different because we're sprinkling in Notre Dame as an opponent as well. So we have to be mindful of that.
With LSU,
that is the athletic director of Clemson, Dan Radakovich. And just on the baseball, which I think was the majority of that piece, Corn, there seems to be some hurt feelings, at least from those inside Clemson, or at least those who handle the message boards and the fan sites up there, about basically not having the game or having the neutral site games at Spirit Communications Park. They seem to forget that the last time that South Carolina played in that stadium, it wasn't too kind to them.
Well, I mean, cry us a river. They've had the luxury of having it in Greenville, not too far from their home base, over these many years, and now it'll be a little bit more convenient for the South Carolina fans, and it'll be convenient for the Clemson fans in the Midlands area who want to go to the game, and they'll be able to get an equal number of tickets. It'll be your own fault as a fan base if you don't buy up all your tickets to equalize what South Carolina will do. And I feel like the Clemson fans in the area are going to do just that, just like the South Carolina fans who are outnumbered in the upstate in the Greenville area bought up their tickets. So, Spirit Communications Park is a beautiful ballpark.
Of course.
It's not very, they have not done much with the entry from Bull Street. It's a very shabby look from Bull Street looking that way. And that's where a great deal of the traffic comes from. I wish they would address that and and make that look a little bit nicer. But otherwise, the park itself is a beautiful park, and the owners there are trying many ways to make it very active with this and high school football games and American Legion tournament games and things like that.
And they got concerts going on out there, and from that perspective, Corn, they're hoping that by 2020 they can get some more development out there. I know they've been talking about doing a whole bunch of stuff out there between like a movie theater and apartment complexes and stuff like that. That stuff's still yet to be consummated. But at least from the perspective of this, like you said, there's plenty of Clemson fans in the Midlands, and because of the way the ticket distribution goes, there still should be plenty of orange in the ballpark, along with the garnet and black for that middle contest.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Hey, Will, it's been a great week. Good start to the fall camp. Next week, things will heat up as the teams will put on the full practice outfits, put on the pads. We'll separate the men from the boys out there. And also, starting next week, our Palmetto Pigskin Tour cranks up. We'll start getting around the state to visit with schools, South Carolina State, Benedict, and Furman on our schedule for next week. So we look forward to that. We look forward to bringing those teams to you and let you hear from their players and coaches as well. Should be a lot of fun. We'll have a great weekend.
You too, bud.
And thanks to Brian Leonard for a great week. Great job as always. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to all of our affiliates as well. We couldn't do it without you. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you on Monday.